गिरिवरदारी यशोदनंदन व्रजजनरंजन यशोदनंदन व्रजजनरंजन यमुनतीरा वनचारि यमुनतीरा वनचारि जय राधमाधव कुंज विहारी राधमाधव कुंज विहारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरदारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरदारी यशोदानंदन व्रजजनरंजन यशोदानंदन व्रजजनरंजन यमुनातीरा वनचारि यमुनातीरा वनचारि जय राधमाधव कुंज विहारी हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा श्रील प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा श्रील प्रभुपदा जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजक सदस्य श्रीमती स्वयं शेष भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। ISKCON संस्थापक आचार्य श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजक सदस्य श्रीमद भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की जय। जय विष्णुपाद श्री गौर किशोर दास महाराज की जय। जय विष्णुपाद सत्यानंद श्री भक्ति विनोद ठाकुर की जय। जय विष्णुपाद वैष्णव सर्वभौम श्री जगन्नाथ दास महाराज की जय। जय श्री रूप साधारण सनातन भट्ट रघुनाथ श्री जी गोपाल भट्टदास श्री गोस्वामी प्रभु की जय। नमाचार्य दास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री द्वैत गदाधर श्री गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की जय। श्री श्री गौरांगी बेंगलोरीश्वर भगवान की जय, श्री मायापुर धाम की जय, श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय, गंगामाई की जय, यमुना माई की जय, भक्ति देवी की जय, तुलसी देवी की जय, अनंत गुरु वैष्णव वृंद की जय, श्री हरनाम संकीर्तन की जय, ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय, इस्कॉन वर्तमान गुरुवंद की जय, समागत भक्त की जय, गौर प्रेमानंद, all glories to the assembled ones, all glories to the assembled ones, all glories to the assembled ones, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga, all glories to Shri Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jayamudire Nashtaprayeshva Bhatreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttamasloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtivi. Hare Krishna, welcome you all to the Friday morning Srimad Bhagavatam class. Today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 29, Text 35. Bhakti yogascha maya manavi udiritaha yayor ekatare naiva purushah purusham braje. Bhakti yogascha maya manavi udiritaha yayor ekatare tare naiva purushah purusham braje. Bhakti yogascha maya manavi udiritaha yayor ekatare naiva purushah purusham braje. Translation Srila Prabhupada ki jai. My dear mother, O daughter of Manu, a devotee who applies the science of devotional service and mystic yoga in this way can achieve the abode of the Supreme Person simply by that devotional service. Prabhupada ki jai. Herein, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Kapil Deva, perfectly explains that the mystic yoga system, consisting of 8 different kinds of yoga activities, has to be performed with the aim of coming to the perfectional stage of Bhakti Yoga. It is not acceptable for one to be satisfied simply by practicing the sitting postures and thinking himself complete. By meditation, one must attain the stage of devotional service. As previously described, a yogi is advised to meditate on the form of the Lord Vishnu from point to point, from the ankles to the legs, to the knees, to the thighs, to the chest, to the neck, and in this way gradually up to the face and then to the ornaments. There is no question of impersonal meditation. When by meditation on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in all detail, one comes to the point of love of God, that is the point of Bhakti Yoga, and at that point he must actually render service to the Lord out of transcendental love. Anyone who practices yoga and comes to the point of devotional service can attain the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his transcendental abode. Here it is clearly stated, Purushaha Purusham Brajet. The Purusha, the living entity, goes to the Supreme Person. The Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entity are qualitatively one. Both are defined as Purusha. The quality of Purusha exists both in the Supreme Godhead and the living entity. Purusha means enjoyer, and the spirit of enjoyment is present both in the living entity and the Supreme Lord. The difference is that the quantity of enjoyment is not equal. The living entity cannot experience the same quantity of enjoyment as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. An analogy may be made with a rich man and a poor man. The propensity for enjoyment is present in both, but the poor man cannot enjoy in the same quantity as the rich man. When the poor man dovetails his desires with those of the rich man, however, and when there is cooperation between the poor man and the rich man, or between the big and the small man, then enjoyment is shared equally. That is like Bhakti Yoga. Purusha Purusham Prajet. When the living entity enters into the kingdom of God and cooperates with the Supreme Lord by giving him enjoyment, he enjoys the same facility or the same amount of pleasure as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. On the other hand, when the living entity wants to enjoy by imitating the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his desire is called Maya and it puts him in the material atmosphere. The living entity who wants to enjoy on his personal account and not cooperate with the Supreme Lord is engaged in materialistic life. As soon as he dovetails his enjoyment with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is engaged in spiritual life. An example might be cited here. The different limbs of the body cannot enjoy life independently. They must cooperate with the whole body and supply food to the stomach. In so doing, all the different parts of the body enjoy equally in cooperation with the whole body. That is the philosophy of Achintya Bheda Bheda, simultaneous oneness and difference. The living entity cannot enjoy life in opposition to the Supreme Lord. He has to dovetail his activities with the Lord by practicing Bhakti Yoga. It is said herein that one can approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead by either the yoga process or the Bhakti Yoga process. This indicates that factually there is no difference between yoga and Bhakti Yoga because the target of both is Vishnu. In the modern age, however, a yoga process has been manufactured which aims at something void and impersonal. Actually, yoga means meditation on the form of Lord Vishnu. If the yoga practice is actually performed according to the standard direction, there is no difference between yoga and Bhakti Yoga. Om Jnanati Mirandasya Jnanam Janashalakaya Chakshurumitramena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Shri Chaitanya Mano Vishram Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Bhutpadamatin Dati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shivapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakandidamsha Ye Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenapando Jaganpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Taptakancha Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishubhanushte Dev Pranamami Haripriya Namo Vishnupada Krishna Pasta Bhutale Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Namne Namaste Saraswati Devi Guruvane Pachane Nirvishesh Dunyavade Paschatade Sthavne Panchakalpata Rupesha Vastu Vachapantana Pavne Vaishnava Pranamani Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Moham Karoti Vacharam Pangam Nandhi Girme Prabhatamaham Nandhi Shri Gurum Dehatarnam Paramantamadam Shri Chaitanya Vishwar. Hare Krishna. So here in this particular sloka, Lord Kapila is telling his mother Devahuti, he says, O daughter of Manu, a devotee who applies the science of devotional service and mystic yoga in this way can achieve the abode of the Supreme Person simply by the devotional service. So that means here, if one practices the Ashtanga Yoga system and the devotional service, then one can reach the abode of the Supreme Person or Personality of Godhead simply by that devotional service. That means there is no difference between the yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, and the devotional service or Bhakti Yoga, which we are speaking about, as long as the correct understanding is there. Now here, in the first paragraph in the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions about the 8 different kinds of activities in the Ashtanga Yoga process. We'll go through them briefly. These 8 kinds of stages are called Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. So Yama and Niyama means practicing the controlling processes by following strict regulations. That means one has got the rules that have got to be followed, and the other one has got the rules, the restrictions that have to be observed. So rules that have to be followed, and for example, in our this thing we say that chanting 60 rounds, observing regulative principles, and when we say regulative principles or that have to be observed very strictly, these are like no meat eating, no intoxication, no gambling, no illicit sex. So if we see, both of them have more or less on the similar lines. So Yama and Niyama are the rules to be observed and one that has to be restricted. Asana, when we talk about asana, these are different sitting postures that have to be observed in this yoga system, eightfold yoga system, and they help a person to regulate his practices. Now, if you sit like stretching your legs and hands, it's got a different focus on the mind than sitting with the sits with both the legs crossed. So asanas have a direct reflection on one's mind and sadhana or practices. Then asana also helps raise one to the standard of faithfulness in devotional service by having proper postures, following proper postures. So the practice of yoga by physical exercise is not the ultimate goal. So yoga is a process, but ultimate goal is to attain Vishnu or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And how to attain is to concentrate and control the mind and train oneself to be situated in faithful devotional service. So ultimately, even if one practices this Ashtanga Yoga, one has to attain the ultimate goal, that is faithful devotional service. This last stage will come at the end. The next one after asana, yama, niyama, and asana is pranayama. Pranayama is actually the process of spiritualizing the mind by mechanical chanting of the pranava omkara and by controlling the breathing system. Now, there are many basically, we control, by this pranayama process, we control the flow of air inside the body and while exhaling also. So it is said that even at this samadhi stage, many fail to control their mind, because mind is very, very difficult, as the Lord, as Arjuna himself says in Bhagavad Gita, that he is finding it chanchalahi mana Krishna. I'm finding it very difficult to control the mind, and the Lord says it's more difficult to control the mind than even a raging wind. You know, when you have a strong wind that blows, it takes everything that comes on its way. Similarly, a mind that is agitated, it takes away all the necessities or all the processes that one is observing. Now, examples are given in the Shastras how a great mystic like Vishwamitra Muni, even when he was in the stage of Samadhi, Samadhi is the last stage when one is supposed to be in trance, fully absorbed in the Supreme Lord. He became a victim of the senses, and then he had cohabited, and then Menaka was born. He had union with Menaka. There are some more examples we'll come to as we go through. So the mind, although it is ceasing to think of sensual activities at present, we might think that I'm controlling the mind at present, but immediately within a fraction of a second, the mind jumps elsewhere, just like a monkey jumps from one branch to the other branch of a tree. So there is a quote in Srimad Bhagavatam 4th canto which says the purpose of pranayama or the mystic yoga is to stop the mind and senses from engaging in fruitive activities. So we perform fruitive activities basically to get some result. And what happens is that we get bound by that result, and in the process, we perform a series of actions and get series of reactions. And depending upon what type of karma we perform, we get enjoyment or happiness. So these are fruitive activities. So these fruitive activities bind us in this material world in the cycle of birth and death. So the purpose of pranayama is to make the body strong and fit for working hard, but ultimately to regulate the mind, control the mind. The aim is to worship Krishna. So it is said that whatever austerity, pranayama, or mystic yoga one practices, they have to be ultimately performed to reach the goal, that is Krishna. In the current system, this eightfold yoga system was effective in the Satya Yuga, when the whole society was very clean, undisturbed, and there are many things that have to be undertaken to practice this Ashtanga Yoga. Not like what you go to the yoga clubs and all. One has to go to a secluded place and find a kusagaras, sit alone. Preferably, it should be in a forest where there is no living like we see today, too many two-wheelers and four-wheelers making a lot of sound, or we have so much of music going around. In these places, you can't practice this Ashtanga Yoga system. So in the current age of Kali Yuga, even the chanting of the holy name of the Lord and dancing can also be considered as pranayama, because when one chants the name of the Lord and dance also, that also brings a lot of control in the breathing process. So ultimately, the purpose of controlling the mind and senses is to engage them in devotional service, which is our constitutional position. Now, there is a quote in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where the Lord himself says that sitting on a level seat that is not too high or too low, not too low, keeping the body straight and erect, yet comfortable, placing the two hands on one's lap and focusing the eyes on the tip of the nose. One should purify the pathways of breathing by practicing the mechanical exercise of pranayama. That is Puraka, Kumbhaka. These are different stages of pranayama also. So that is regulating the air. But ultimately, these sitting postures, when they are combined with the pranayama and the control of breathing with the breathing process, then one is able to reach that stage of controlling the senses and the mind. Then the next one is called pratyahara, which means to wind up the activities of the senses. So when we practice this pranayama, asana, yama, niyama, and all those things, what happens is that we are able to control the mind and the senses. And when they are controlled, we are able to wind up the activities of the senses from the external material world. And we are in the process of placing ourselves in the spiritual path. Then the next one is that dharana dhyana. So the dharana dhyana also mentioned that these are meant for trying for spiritual elevation through meditation and to achieve all auspiciousness through the meditation on the Lord's body. So in the Ashtanga Yoga system, this is the 7th stage of perfection, that is dhyana. So what is this dhyana? This is comparable to the current state of 9 process of devotional service. That is, the 7th stage of Ashtanga Yoga is compared to the 3rd stage of devotional service. What is the 3rd stage? There are 9 stages of Bhakti Yoga, devotional service. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Satyam, Atmanevedanam, and so forth. So the first one is hearing, then comes chanting, and then contemplating on it, that is Vishnu Smaranam. So this dhyana, or focusing the mind, is compared to the 3rd process of devotional service, that is meditation. So by execute of proper devotional service, one automatically becomes an expert yogi. In other words, the process of jnana or yoga are preliminary stages of devotional service. That means the hearing and chanting process, which we recommend in the age of Kali, is equivalent to the 7th stage of the Ashtanga Yoga system. So when one practices the Bhakti Yoga system of Shravanam and Kirtanam, one automatically reaches the stage of Vishnu Smaranam, which is the purpose of yoga process also. So you practice yama, niyama, pranayama, pratyahara, and reach the controlling, thereby try to reach the controlling of the senses of the mind. Then one reaches the stage of samadhi. So this samadhi we'll understand a little bit. The realization of the personal form of the Lord is the highest perfectional stage of yoga. That means even the Ashtanga yoga that we do, the highest perfectional stage is a realization of the personal form of the Lord. That means the Lord has got a personal form, but many generally try to focus on the impersonal form of the Lord. Lord also has an impersonal form, but in this age of Kali, it is not possible to meditate on anything that is impersonal, which is also described in Bhagavad Gita. So this realization of the personal form of the Lord is the ultimate perfection of yoga. So after practicing the sitting postures and other regulative principles of the system, one finally reaches the last stage of the Ashtanga Yoga, which is called Samadhi. This Samadhi is nothing but an absorption on the Supreme Lord. In the Samadhi stage, it is said that one can see the personality of Godhead in his partial form as Paramatma or as he is. That means by practicing the Ashtanga Yoga system, one can see the partial form of the Lord, which is Paramatma, situated in everyone's heart of every living entity. Now, the Lord is situated. Now, there are three phases of understanding the Supreme Lord. One is Brahman, one is Paramatma. Brahman is the glaring effulgence that covers the body of the Lord. Paramatma is the four-handed form of the Lord situated in the heart of the every living entity by the side of the individual soul. And Bhagavan is the ultimate feature or the complete personality of Godhead, and which is absolute truth. So Bhagavan, Brahman and Paramatma are already included in the realization of Bhagavan or the total feature of the personality of Godhead. So if one realizes Bhagavan feature of the Lord, automatically it includes Brahman and Paramatma also. So to achieve this Paramatma feature of the Lord by the Ashtanga Yoga process, one need to concentrate his mind on such narration, and he has to be always absorbed in that thought. So he has to focus on the form of the Lord, which we will discuss now. And then if he is able to control his mind and senses and focus on the personal form, four-handed form of the Lord, then he can reach the stage of Samadhi. But then it is said that it can take many, many births also. And then one may not necessarily achieve the perfectional stage, because generally people in Kali Yuga are highly disturbed due to so many reasons. Now, however, Srila Prabhupada, as it mentions in the purport, it is not acceptable for one to be simply satisfied by practicing the sitting postures and thinking himself complete. So generally, the modern day yoga system, what they go practice is something like a physical bodily exercise to make your body fit to practice the yoga system, by which one attains the ultimate goal. Now that we will come to. A yogi is actually advised to meditate on the form of Lord Vishnu from point to point. Now, there is a form that is described in the Shastras, 400 form, but how should a yogi meditate on that 400 form of the Lord is mentioned here in Srimad Bhagavatam. One should meditate on the form of Lord Vishnu point to point. You cannot straight away see the face of the Lord. That's not the correct way of seeing the form of the Lord. One has to start from the ankles of the Lord to the legs, then to the knees, then to the thighs, and then to the chest, and so forth, and goes on up to the neck. And in this way, gradually one progresses from bottom to the top and reaches to the face, and finally then to the ornaments. There is no question of impersonal meditation. So meditation means by focusing on this form of the Lord, one can be situated on that form of the Lord itself, by which one reaches, is always focused on that and is not disturbed due to any external circumstances. That is what is called Samadhi. So when one meditates on this personality of Godhead in this detailed process that I mentioned, one comes to the point of love of God. That is the point, ultimate goal of Bhakti Yoga also. And at that point, he must render service to the Lord out of transcendental love. Now, why this is mentioned? Because the soul, being a part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, has got a constitutional position, just as Srila Prabhupada gives an example of how our body has got so many parts: hands, legs, stomach, eyes, ears, etc. Now, the hand cannot put food individually to the eyes or ears or to the stomach separately for each parts of the body. But when the food is put into the mouth, it enters into the stomach, and the whole body gets nourished by the food that is given in the stomach, through the mouth to the stomach. and the energy is diffused all over the body. So similarly, when one worships the form of the Lord, it includes worship of all the forms of the Lord, that is uh, Brahman, Paramatma, and also Bhagavan. So, and it includes the worship of all and every demigod, everything is included in that. One need not, there are 33 crore demigods, each one having a separate function. Vayu is in charge of air, Varuna is in charge of water, one demigod is in charge of our eyesight, one demigod is in charge of our intelligence. So there are so many demigods who are all assisting the Supreme Lord in each and every function of this material creation. And we cannot satisfy each and every demigod. But just like watering the true root of the tree, when one waters the root of the tree, the water already reaches all the trunks, branches, leaves, etc. So one need not separately undertake worship of one individual demigod or so forth. So here the next point that is mentioned is that all the living entities being part and parcel of the Lord, they are all also called as Purusha. Purusha means enjoyer. The Lord is called Supreme Purusha, and we are all part and parcel of that Purusha. And because we are part and parcel of that Supreme Lord, and as the Lord has got a tendency to enjoy, that attitude or ability to enjoy exists in the living entities like us also. The Lord is a supreme enjoyer, so he is the supreme Purusha. But being a part and parcel of that supreme Lord, the Atma, we are not now talking about the body. We are talking about the spirit soul that is within the body, due to which the body is functioning. If the soul leaves the body, then the body is dead. There is no function of the body. So that soul which is within our body, being a part and parcel of the Supreme Soul, has the same ability or constitutional position to enjoy like the Supreme Soul, who is the Supreme Enjoyer. But there is a difference. The spirit of enjoyment is there. The difference is the quantity of the enjoyment. Both are not equal. Because we are Anu, Anu means we are small, and the Lord is Vibhu. Vibhu means he is large. So we are a minute part and parcel. But being a part and parcel of the Lord, we have that tendency to enjoy like the Supreme Lord. That quantity of enjoyment is what is different between us and the Supreme Lord, because everything belongs to Him. Everything, whatever is there in this material world or the spiritual world, everything belongs to the Supreme Lord, and everything is meant for the enjoyment of the Supreme Lord. Now, for example, we may buy a house. We work very hard, lifelong. It's not very easy to buy a house or build a house. So we may work. Sometimes some might get some ancestral property, but still one has to struggle for his existence in this material world by working very hard. So take this example of buying a house. One has to struggle very, very hard. And then what one thinks is that I have worked lifelong. I put my hard-earned money in this house. This house belongs to me. Now, actually, if you look at, the body belongs to the Lord, the soul belongs to the Lord. Everything that is there in this material manifestation, like bricks, so many things are used. Everything belongs to the Lord. But ultimately, we claim that everything belongs to us. With all these elements, we make a house. But one day, everything is taken off from us at the time of death. So we cannot say that something belongs to us eternally. Then one might think the house belongs to my family. Does your family belong to you forever after you leave the body? After death? No. Your body is gone and you have gone somewhere else, whereas the family continues. So it is a illusory vision that everything is I and mine. That is what is called Maya. So why we are put into this situation, that is also mentioned here. There is a tendency for us to enjoy like the Supreme Lord, but that propensity for enjoyment is different for the Lord and for us. Yes, Srila Prabhupada gives an example of a rich man and a poor man. Both have got a propensity to enjoy, but a rich man has got a much bigger propensity to enjoy than a poor man. But if a poor man doubts himself with the rich man, then what happens is that he can even get a share of the uh, enjoyment or the facilities of the rich man. So both of them share. Similarly, that is what is the process of Bhakti Yoga is all about. When we situate ourselves in our constitutional position being a part and parcel is to serve the Lord. And when we serve the Lord, and when we do that service in transcendental platform without any expectation, then we love the Lord automatically. There is a natural tendency in the soul for us to love that Lord. But that is covered by the illusory potency called Maya. That is also explained by Srila Prabhupada in this following next purport. He says, when a living entity wants to enjoy by imitating the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his desire is called Maya, and it puts him in the material atmosphere. So we have a tendency to enjoy, but when we want to enjoy like the Lord, which is not possible, then the Lord puts us into a situation in this material uh, uh, manifestation, which is what is called Maya. We'll come to that. What is Maya? And when we come here, we realize that we are not able to enjoy because tendency is there, but what we try to enjoy is an illusory power called Maya. That Maya means that which is not. So what we see in this material world is not true. Whatever we might see that are facilities for enjoyment, they are not the real enjoyment, but it's a false enjoyment because it never lasts for a long time. For example, we might listen to some type of music and we might like it for some time. But after hearing it a couple of times, that same music doesn't give us that enjoyment. So anything that is there in this material world is impermanent, it's not permanent. So it has no meaning, it has no value also. But we think that everything is mine and everything is permanent. My house, my family, we think that everything is permanent, but everything is bound up at some point of time. This is due to the reason that we want to enjoy separately from the Lord as much as the Lord, which is not possible. So when we have this separate tendency, then we don't cooperate with the Lord, and then we are centered in this material world. But as soon as we come here, and through the process of hearing and chanting, we understand that we are not the supreme enjoyers. We are meant to facilitate the enjoyment of the Lord. And when the Lord becomes satisfied by rendering transcendental loving service, the Lord becomes very, very pleased. Just like when a son or a daughter serves their father and mother, the parents become very pleased. So when they become pleased, they become happy. And they want to share that happiness with their children also. So similarly, when we as part and parcel of the Supreme Lord render transcendental loving service, not as a duty, but the ultimate process of bhakti, this eightfold yoga also is mentioned here, should be bhakti yoga. Why? Because there's so many processes of yoga. One is jnana yoga. One goes on trying to acquire knowledge. And what is his goal? To reach the Brahman stage. Brahman is the impersonal Brahma Jyoti, which I mentioned, is the glaring effulgence that covers the body of the Lord. So, after acquiring lot of knowledge, one ultimately tries to reach that glowing effulgence of the Lord. And there one can never be happy because there is no service rendered in that. Ultimately, one becomes frustrated and then again comes back to this material world. Then this process is one process is dhyana yoga, which is what the whole chapter is about. Meditating on the uh, four-handed form of the Lord, which we describe from bottom and all the way going to the top. That is the way one has to see the beauty of the Lord also, not straight away see the face of the Lord. And this meditation has to be undertaken in a secluded place without any disturbance. And it can take not one birth, it can take many births also. But ultimately, it is mentioned that the goal is Vishnu. So when one sees the form of the focuses, meditates on the form of the Lord in the Ashtanga Yoga process, then one may be able to see the Lord face to face. And that is the stage Bhakti Yoga starts. So Bhakti Yoga is rendering service to the Lord. Whereas in the Ashtanga Yoga process, one may see the form of the Lord, but which should ultimately reach a stage of rendering service. So if one reaches a stage in Ashtanga Yoga of even seeing the Lord, but not able to render service, it is a failure after a lot of putting a lot of hard effort. Similarly, even in Bhakti Yoga, if one practices Bhakti Yoga, the process that takes up the process of hearing and chanting, then one remembers the Lord all the time. When one remembers the Lord all the time, then one can reach a stage where one wants to render service unto Him. That is our constitutional position. So many different types of services are there. Like hearing itself is a service, preaching is a service, chanting is a service, Sankirtan is a service, cooking for the Lord is a service, cleaning the paraphernalia of the Lord is a service. All these are services rendered to the Lord in various forms. So when one renders the service to the Lord, by which ultimately one should be rendering it out of transcendental love, not as a matter of duty. So if somebody is cooking, Mataji normally cook for the Lord. So if somebody is cooking, but thinks, oh, what a burden it is cooking early in the morning, getting up in the morning and cooking and offering and all these things. That is maybe a service, but at some point of time, one should reach a stage as to how one should start thinking, how can I cook for the pleasure of the Lord? What does the Lord like? How does the Lord like to be offered? For example, even if you do the best of cooking, if tulsi is not offered in this boga, the Lord does not accept it. So one should reach a stage how to cook the best way and offer the best way to the Lord. Similarly, one does the chanting. How best can I chant that the Lord becomes pleased? How best can I preach? You can't preach unless and until you are fully well versed in the Shastras. So, for which you have to read, which takes time to understand. Philosophically is there, pastimes are there. Why Lord perform these pastimes? It's an intricate matter. So one has to understand these things, and when one understands and expresses these things to others, to the others who are not in this movement, about the purpose of life, human life, that is what is called preaching. Preaching can also be undertaken to existing or new devotees, etc. But for preaching also, one has to do it as a pleasure for the Lord, not for one's own self-satisfaction. So ultimately, all the services that are rendered, whether in Bhakti Yoga or through the Ashtanga Yoga, which should culminate in Bhakti Yoga, is to attain transcendental loving service to the Lord. And that is the ultimate goal of life. And when one renders this loving service, then at the end of one's life, he is taken back to the spiritual planets where he is constitutionally situated. You can't do anything there because there is nothing like Maya, which we see in this material world. So when you are there, you are always busy only in rendering service to the Lord and fully engaged in serving the Lord, by which the Lord becomes happy. And by in the process of making the Lord happy, the living entity or the individual soul also attains that bliss. So this is the difference, or this is the main point in this particular purport, which says that Purushaha Purusham Brajet. That means the individual goes and attains the planet of the Supreme Lord. And that understanding of this philosophy is called Achintya Beda Beda. That means simultaneously oneness and difference. We are being part and parcel of the Lord. We have oneness in quality. That quality also, the Lord is full in so many qualities, but we are not completely full, partially we are full. So we are one with the Lord. At the same time, we are different in terms of quantity. So that this particular philosophy is what is called Achintya Beda Tattva. And the living entity cannot enjoy life in opposition to the Supreme Lord. He has to dovetail his activities with the Lord by practicing Bhakti Yoga. So we cannot enjoy separately from the Lord. Trying to enjoy separately from the Lord is like trying to enjoy Maya, which is an illusion itself. So like in the beginning of the class, I gave examples how Vishwamitra was a very great yogi. He was deep in his meditation, but he just heard the noise of ankle bends of Menaka and Shakuntala was born. Similarly, Bharat Maharaj, he was in deep meditation on the bank of a river. And what happened was he was disturbed when he heard the sound of a deer cub. And he took it to his ashram palace and he started uh, petting the deer. And finally, he developed attachment for that. And finally, what happened was that meditation in the process of getting disturbed, he got attached to the deer and he had to take the body of a deer. Similarly, example is given in Srimad Bhagavatam about Sauvarya Muni. He was also a great yogi who was practicing this Ashtanga Yoga system. And he went underwater to perform this tapasya. But he, like I mentioned in the beginning of the class, in this yoga process, one is supposed to keep his eyes closed and focus this thing on the tip of the nose. But Sauvarya Muni, he was performing tapasya underwater. But he saw just two fish mating, and after that, he thought that he should get married. And his desire to get married was such that even though he was in an old age, he wanted to get married. But he was already very old. Then he went to a king to see the daughter of the king. They did not accept him because he was already very old. So he realized that he was not getting married because he was very old. Now, we might see even in the current day situation, we are not talking about the yoga platform. Many might be in their old age, but they may not be getting married. This is common because young women want to marry young men, not old women. So Saubari Muni was also then thinking that since I am old, I'm not getting married. But because he was a great mystic, what happens in the Ashtanga Eightfold Mystic Yoga system is that when one attains mystic perfection, the Lord gives lot of material opulence, like one can become, and there are many opulences like Anima, Lagima, etc. One can become lighter than the air, he can fly from one place to the other. So like this, one can attain some mystic powers by practicing the Ashtanga Yoga system. But what happens in the process of getting this mystic opulence is one becomes attached to this mystic opulence and thereby bound by it. So that is another obstruction in the Eightfold Yoga system. So if one does not reach the stage of rendering service to the Lord, which is the process of Bhakti Yoga also, then one can get stuck in this Ashtanga Yoga system and become attached to mystic opulences. Or Lord gives many opulences, awards many opulences, but one becomes attached to these things. And when one is attached to opulence, then one cannot live without these things. So this Saubharya Muni, he by his yogic power, he became young. And this time he went back to the king, and the king had 50 daughters. And at this time, all the 50 daughters wanted to marry the king because he was looking young and beautiful. And then after marriage, everyone, when he's newly married, a man and woman feels the married life to be very attractive. Then as one has children and settles down in life, one starts realizing that married life is not very easy. It is very difficult. And particularly in Kali Yuga, it's all the more difficult. So Saubhari Muni ultimately realized that he fell down from his path of meditation by just seeing two fish mating. So imagine what could be the condition in this Kali Yuga when there are so many disturbing situations for each and everyone if he has to practice, when he cannot reach ultimately the stage of even controlling the mind and senses. Forget about meditating on the form of the Lord, from ankle to the beautiful face of the Lord. One can even not control the senses and the mind. So that is why it is said that in this Kali Yuga, one should practice the Bhakti Yoga process, which is very easy to practice. And Sri Prabhupada concludes in the process that there is no difference between yoga and Bhakti Yoga because the target is Lord Vishnu. So goal of both the process is ultimately render loving, transcendental, loving service to the Lord. But in the modern age, however, a yoga process has been manufactured which aims at something void and impersonal. Actually, yoga means, Sri Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, Actually, yoga means meditation on the form of Lord Vishnu. If the yoga practice is actually performed according to the standard direction of the Eightfold Process, then there is no difference between yoga and Bhakti Yoga. So, if the Eightfold Yoga system is practiced according to the standard regulations that are mentioned, then there is no difference between yoga and Bhakti Yoga. So, this is the essence of this today's sloka. But before concluding, I would like to explain just two verses of what Bhakti Yoga is. Bhakti Yoga means devotional service. This is also the process which is recommended in this Kali Yoga. Bhakti Yoga means Anya Vilashita Shunyam Jnana Karma Janavitam Anukulyena Krishnanushinam Bhakti Ruttama. That the translation is, when first class devotional service develops, one must be devoid of all material desires, knowledge obtained by monistic philosophy, and fruitive action. The devotee must constantly serve Krishna favorably as Krishna desires. So we'll go to this point. So even in devotional service, there are different stages, but when perfect or first class devotional service develops in a person, one becomes devoid of all material desire. One is not interested in anymore in the material desire because it has no value in this material world. It's all temporary. And one is also devoid of knowledge obtained by monistic philosophy. Monistic philosophy is that by which one thinks that I am as good as the Lord. Why? Because there are certain philosophers who speculate that we are all Lord. So when one speculates on this philosophy, one gets tries, like I mentioned initially about the Brahman platform, by trying to acquire a lot of knowledge, one tries to become a monist, or he thinks that he has become God. That is a bigger offense to the Lord. One can never become God. And also one becomes devoid of fruitive action. That fruitive action is we perform activities for getting the results, and we become attached to the result which bind us. So whether it is karma yoga, which is getting fruitive results, or jnana yoga, which is the process of acquiring knowledge, or ashtanga yoga, which is called dhyana yoga, or ultimately bhakti yoga, the devotee must constantly serve Krishna favorably as Krishna desires, not as we desire. So this is one definition of bhakti yoga. And before concluding the class, I would like to mention one more point, which is also there. Sarvopadi vinirmuktam tatparat enilmanam rishikena rishikesh sevanam bhakti ruchyate. Rather, bhakti or devotional service means engaging all our senses in the service of the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the master of all senses. So, bhakti means engaging all our senses, eyes, ears, nose, everything in rendering service to the Supreme Lord, who is known as Rishikesha. Rishikesha means this is the definition of the Lord, who is the master of all senses. And when the spirit soul renders service unto the Supreme, there are two side effects. So, what happens when we serve the Supreme Lord? There are two side effects. One is free from all the material designations. We don't have any more material designation like eye and mind. And one's senses are purified simply by being employed in the service of the Lord. That means when we engage our senses in the service of the Lord, who is the master of the senses, our senses, which are now engaged in material activities, so-called material activities, automatically become purified. One example, like about cooking, we may cook for our sense gratification. That will bind us because we want to cook for what we like. We don't want to cook what Krishna likes. But when we do the same cooking for the Lord, then what happens? We gradually we reach a stage when we want to cook for the pleasure of the Lord. Our cooking ability, our cooking tendency, everything becomes purified by the process of engaging the senses in the service of the Lord. So at that time, one becomes free from all material designations and the senses are completely free from contamination. They are completely purified. So this is the stage, ultimate stage in Bhakti Yoga. So before concluding, I would like to give a quote from Bhagavad Gita, where the Lord Himself tells Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita chapter 6, He says, Yoginam api sarvesham matkarene antaratmanam shraddhavan bhajate yomam same yukta tumo mataha. The translation is, out of all the yogis, the one with great faith who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself and renders transcendental loving service to me, He is the most intimately united with me in yoga, and he is the highest of all. That is my opinion. That is, here the Lord says, concludes by saying in Bhakti Yoga, that of all the yogis, of those who practice Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, but one who has faith and abides in the Lord and always thinks of the Lord and renders transcendental loving service is the most intimately united with me in yoga. Yoga means a process of linking process. We link ourselves with the Supreme Lord. So when we render loving service, we are automatically linked to with the Supreme Lord, by which we want to do service to the Lord for the Lord's pleasure. And that is the highest which the Lord says, which is Bhakti Yoga. So with this, I conclude the class by concluding that whatever process of yoga one undertakes, and this particular chapter is focusing on Dhyana Yoga, that Dhyana Yoga should ultimately lead to Bhakti Yoga. So thank you all very much. For the next 1 or 2 minutes, I can take any questions or any comments if anybody has got.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavat Pranam Mataji.
Okay, you were talking about the Eightfold Mystic yoga. So do we also find in this Kali Yuga, or is it only it is only in other yugas that we find such sages? Can we say that Srila Prabhupada was one similar to that?
You mean to say the mystic perfections, or
yes,
what is it?
Yes, Prabhupada.
Okay, when a devotee practices full devotional service, the Lord empowers the devotee also. But a devotee does not aim for mystic perfection. He becomes detached from all these. Mystic perfection is a material facility that when one gets, it becomes very difficult for him to detach himself from that. For example, if you have a lot of wealth, you can understand it is very difficult for us to detach ourselves from the wealth because we are attached to it. We think that wealth is mine. So similarly, a devotee never aspires to attain this mystic perfection. But there are examples in Srimad Bhagavatam also that there are many devotees, like Srila Prabhupada himself was a great mystic yogi. He could convert, he went to the foreign country with just 40 rupees, which is not practically even possible for us to even imagine. But he could do that because he was a great devotee of the Lord. So, like Srila Prabhupada, there are many examples given in Shastras also, like Rasikananda Prabhu. He was a great devotee of the Lord. And somebody came to him, he said that, see how this yogi is doing a lot of mystic. This Rasikananda was actually brushing his teeth. You know, those days they used to brush the teeth with a neem stick. So he threw it and he started flying with that. So devotees also can attain this mystic perfection, but they don't aim for it. But they become empowered by the Lord to the extent that it is necessary to facilitate or implement devotional service. Like Srila Prabhupada was empowered to practice devotional service and spread devotional service. So like that, the Lord also empowers the living entities. Is it clear, Mataji?
Okay, Prabhuji. Thank you so much. Very
Thank
much.
you, Mataji.
So the present day sages that we find in the Himalayas, who perform with one leg penances like earlier, do they
Yes.
also
What
are
the
they
question?
the present day, the sages
And
that
in
we
the
find?
percentage, okay, in the percentage, even if somebody goes to the Himalayas, it is practically not possible. It might
Okay.
have, the yoga process is not wrong, but the situation in Kali Yuga is so disturbing that it is difficult to practice, and one might have to go through many, many hundreds and thousands of births to attain even perfection through that process in Kali Yuga. Whereas in Bhakti Yoga, one can attain perfection even in one birth. Srila Prabhupada said, in one birth you can go back to Godhead. That is the difference.
Right, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dandavat Pranam. Very nice class.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you, Mataji. Anybody else? Any other questions? Any other comments? So, Hare Krishna Prabhu. So, I take the class as concluded.
Right, Prabhuji. Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, man. Thank you. Hare Krishna.